This weekend, Maleficent scares her way back into theaters, so today I'm going to stop and rank all 16 Disney live-action, well, one's fake live-action, remakes from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I started this channel because I was driving everyone around me crazy talking about movies way too much. If you can relate, you're probably in the right place. Consider clicking that subscribe button. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of all 16 Disney live-action remakes. We're going to disagree. That's the fun part. Let's just keep it civil. Speaking of talking movies way too much, if you've ever wanted to ask me a question, the best place to get in touch with me is my Instagram account. I respond to almost all of my direct messages. With that said, let's get started. In last place is Alice Through the Looking Glass. This is a bizarre and bland take on the Lewis Carroll source material, oddly because it's too normal. The usual fun and absurdity and wordplay associated with Lewis Carroll is replaced with daddy issues and time travel. Ever wonder why the red and white queen don't get along? Or is the Mad Hatter's dad proud of him? Yeah, me neither. But now we have a movie that answers those questions. And once again, Alice takes the back seat in her own movie. Of all the things that you could do with the Lewis Carroll source material, why would you do this? Number 15 is 102 Dalmatians. This is a shockingly lame sequel to the remake that's about as ill-conceived of Apprentice as it could have possibly had. The main storyline involves Cruella de Vil going through psychological treatment that forces her to respect dogs more, and then she's released into society. That's a really weird plot for a children's movie. Beyond that, the creators seem to think the appeal of the original was just Glenn Close, so they abandoned the rest of the cast and the charm of the original and doubled down on just more Cruella de Vil hijinks. Whatever they were going for, it didn't work for me. Next up is Dumbo. Now, I can appreciate that this movie functions as a remake, a reimagining, and a sequel all at once. The original Dumbo is only a pinch over an hour long, so they actually did bring quite a bit new to the table. Unfortunately, I really didn't care for the execution itself. Everything about this film felt phony to me, from the look of it, to the characters, to the drama and tension inside of it. Most of it does go back to the script. Certain plot beats keep being repeated all throughout the film. The adult characters keep making bad choices just because the script demands it. Unlike Dumbo, this one didn't fly for me. Number 13 is Alice in Wonderland. On paper, Tim Burton seems like the perfect choice to adapt Lewis Carroll's works, but something went terribly off in the process. The whole movie feels like they took the original source material and just squished it through the blockbuster template. Suddenly, the Mad Hatter, played by then box office gold Johnny Depp, is promoted to the lead. It feels more epic than it does absurd, and the movie ends with Alice in armor fighting a dragon. It has been over 15 years since I did read Alice in Wonderland, but all of this feels entirely off to me. There's a good bit of creativity in the production and creature design here, but a lot of the CGI hasn't really aged all that well for me. For all the weirdness on screen, the movie itself was pretty bland. At number 12 is Malefecent Mistress of Evil. This one was pretty frustrating for me as the idea of the film is actually pretty good. They had all the ingredients and the recipe for a pretty neat little film, and then they cooked it all wrong. With a plot line involving weddings and dueling kingdoms and things like that, it almost comes off a little bit like Game of Thrones for kids. That's kind of the problem here, as the final battle has a massive body count, but the film only has a PG rating, so it has to nerf over the consequences of a whole lot of people dying. The runtime is also under 2 hours long, and that's simply not enough time to have this much plot and this many characters, so everything feels awfully shallow, like they were skipping over all the depth and motivation that the characters really need. Angelina Jolie, once again, is great as Maleficent when she's on screen, but she disappears for big chunks of the film. I wasn't bored by the film, but it also didn't work all that well for me either. And we have The Sorcerer's Apprentice. In theory, Nicolas Cage re-teaming with the director of National Treasure to make a Sorcerer movie based off of a section of Fantasia sounds like an awful lot of fun. The movie itself never really lives up to its concept though. The cast is great, the visuals look good, and there's no shortage of sorcerer and wizard action inside of it. But it's one of those movies where everything feels just a little bit out of sync, a little bit off. You can't quite pinpoint your finger on what's wrong, but you know something is wrong with it. It has everything it's supposed to have, but still it never quite cast a spell on me. Kicking off our top 10 is Maleficent. Angelina Jolie is perfectly cast in the title role. She of course has the look, but she also balances the good, the bad, the quirky, the charming, all the things the character needs to be. She does it so well. And I also appreciate the fact that they're telling a classic story that we all know from a different perspective. The central premise of the film was one that I never felt I could fully get on board with. It's just kind of weird to take one of the best heinous villains of all time and turn them into a misunderstood anti-hero. You lose something from the character when you do that. Sometimes I just want my villains to be villains. Number 9 is Christopher Robin. Disney gives the Hook treatment to Winnie the Pooh, and the results were pretty mixed for me. On the one hand, they nailed the emotion, the sentiment, the wordplay, and the hijinks of the original source material, except in a real-world setting. But it's just too long and slow. Granted, the original films also moved at a slow pace, but those were also collections of short stories that were only about 10 minutes long, put together in films that were only a little over an hour long. This movie is an hour and 40 minutes long telling one story, and because of that, it just drags from beginning to end. And number 8 is Beauty and the Beast, a direct adaptation of one of the greatest animated films of all time. With the level of talent involved in front of and behind the camera, and with this source material, it is entirely watchable, and it's just a lot of fun to see this story brought to real life. At the same time, it also exists purely for the purpose of nostalgia. For me, that meant it was a ton of fun to take my daughter to go see it while she was wearing her Belle dress. Also added about 30 minutes of new material that's forgettable at best, but the decision to include the Black Plague as part of Belle's origin story is interesting to say the least. It's definitely worth a watch, but if I'm in the mood to rewatch Beauty and the Beast, I'm gonna go for the animated one. Next up is Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book. The original live-action remake might lack the bells and whistles of the current remakes, but it makes up for it with a good old-fashioned sense of adventure and romance. And given the source material and the cast here, when you got Lena Headey, Jason Scott Lee, Cary Elwes, and Sam Neill, I'm surprised people don't talk about this film more often. It definitely feels like they injected a little bit of Tarzan into the mix, and the animals take a backseat, but still, you care about the heroes, you hate the villain, and it's kind of fun to see Cary Elwes basically play the reverse of his character from The Princess Bride. Coming in at number 6 is Aladdin. This is one of the most fun films on this list, as the original film lent itself really well to being adapted into a live action adventure, and the twists and tweaks and changes that they made to the story here and there, I thought fit this version really nicely. All of the cast is quite charming, except for Jafar. But of course, Will Smith steals the show as the genie. When you try to think about people that could bring the screen presence and charisma and humor that Robin Williams did without copying him, I mean, Will Smith is just such a perfect person to be able to do that. This film actually got a little bit better for me on repeat viewings. It has a certain infectious energy to it that makes it rewatchable. And I didn't care all that much for the new versions of the classic songs, but overall, this is a good time at the movies. Bringing us into the top 5 is 101 Dalmatians. This is an unashamedly campy take on the source material and just kind of a blast. It kicks off with a bunch of cute animals and leads to kind of a Home Alone-esque finale with cute animals. Throughout the whole film, there's no shortage of slapstick fun and cute animals. The movie is famous for Glenn Close hamming it up as Cruella de Vil, but really the whole cast works really nicely on screen when you got Jeff Daniels and Hugh Laurie. It might be cheap entertainment, but it is definitely entertainment. Number 4 is The Lion King. Now I know a lot of people hated this movie, but it worked for me. The original Lion King is my absolute favorite animated film of all time, and this to me felt like a great cover of my favorite song. It's the same melody, it's the same lyrics, just a different band singing the song. Also, it's a technical masterpiece. I mean, technically, it shouldn't have been included on this list as it's not live action. But the visuals are so photorealistic, they were absolutely convincing. It looked absolutely real. Except for the fact that you had animals talking and singing, which isn't real. Visuals alone, I think that this movie deserved more respect than it got from some people, but I really do get that some people found it to be very emotionally distant because photorealistic lions can't emote with their faces since lions don't do that. But for me, it hit all the right notes, and I appreciate having this different version. Real quick before I give you my top 3, be sure to share your ranking down below in the comment section. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, if you've enjoyed this video in the past, I've ranked the Disney Renaissance, the modern Disney films, the Pixar films. You can see all of that right up here. If you want more content like this, there it is. In third place is Pete's Dragon. This is a very loose adaptation of the original film that in almost every single way improves upon the original. What it does so well is tell a heartfelt and heartwarming adventure about an orphaned child who finds family with a dragon and then returns to humanity. Another thing I really liked that this film did is that while there's kind of the bad guys inside of it, there's not really a villain. There's not someone that's evil with nefarious motives. You just have people misunderstanding a situation, and so you can have sadness inside of it, but you can never feel like evil. It's a nice little film for the whole family. Runner-up is The Jungle Book. This is a technological achievement, what they were able to do both with the technology, the CGI, and with a child actor running around on a green screen and giving a convincing performance that they were talking to animals. And of course, this paved the way for this year's Lion King. What makes this such a nice adventure is that it keeps the story very simple, and then it just crafts all the pieces and the characters and puts them in place to build the tension to make for an exciting adventure. As you move into the third act, there's reveals, there's twists and turns that don't make for a more complicated story, but make for a really nice payoff. It's a movie that absolutely delivers on the experience that the trailer promised. Coming in first place is Cinderella, an elegant take on the Disney classic. It shaves away certain distinctive elements of the animated version and instead fleshes out the characters and takes them places that they didn't go before, that gives the movie new emotional resonance. Kenneth Branagh is just the perfect director to take this type of story and give it a sense of grandeur to it and sophistication. It does what all great remakes do. It's faithful and true to the original while being its own thing that brings so much new to the table and explores new elements inside of the story, and it just stands on its own. Therefore, it comes in at number 1. Remember, if you want to check out my other Disney and Pixar rankings, you can do that right over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much. The little tweaks and changes they made here and there take on the short realistic lions can't emote with their faces.